Hello everyone, my name is Garvin and I read things and ramble about them on the internet for your entertainment. So after a long pause, for which I do want to thank you for your patience, we are at last prepped to begin a dive into the deep and at times murky world of the Merfolk. Today we're going to be looking at some of the oldest mermaid myths and focusing on divine merfolk, that is, the gods and goddesses that have met our qualifications to qualify as mermen or mermaids. So just to go over those requirements real quick, they have to be aquatic, they have to have a hybrid form of human, fish, or another aquatic creature. We are including snakes as long as they are aquatic, just for the record. And they have to have a physical existence, so no ghost, for example. Now, the stories are stories of beings that have been worshipped, and in some cases are still being worshipped. So if I end up talking about your faith, please let me know if I've made a mistake. I intend no disrespect, and I want to be as accurate as possible. Also, folks, keep your eyes out for some repeating themes in these stories, because they're going to come up again and again. And, before we jump in, one of my patrons, who is a marine biologist who's been looking into this with me, insists that I inform all of you that mermaids would be sea mammals, not fish. This is very important. He's going to likely ask me to repeat that. So, once again, for the cheap seats, mermaids are sea mammals, not fish. So the oldest just straight out mermaid story I could find comes from northern Syria in the classical era, and it's the story of the goddess Atargatis, called Derceto by the Greeks. She was the consort of a god named Hadad, a storm god, and she herself was a fertility and love goddess who had fish and doves as her symbols. In Roman times, she was served by a priesthood of eunuchs, men who had been castrated, so high bar for entry into this group. This really has to be something you want to do. These priests cared for the temple, performed rites, and above all cared for the sacred fish ponds, which were full of a type of fish particularly sacred. They couldn't be touched, they couldn't be harmed. These priests were also known for cross-dressing, growing their hair out long, and wearing heavy makeup. They were said to bring idols out to various villages to perform rites that involved them playing loud music and dancing and getting into such a frenzy that they would bite and cut themselves, and this would encourage the villagers to make offerings to the goddess. Now, as for the myth, the story goes that after offending Aphrodite, she was cursed to fall in love with a shepherd named Simios, or Ekthys, which does mean fish, by the way, and when she found herself pregnant, felt deeply ashamed of herself, so she threw herself into the lake and turned into a mermaid. Although some engravings have her with human legs and a fish tail growing out behind her, so I guess the form of a mermaid hadn't been completely ironed out yet. Now, there are also different versions in which in some she laid an egg on land, in others she laid it in the water and the current carried it to shore, and in still others she gives birth like a human does. But in all versions, the result is a beautiful baby girl who is abandoned by her mother and is fed and cared for by doves until a royal shepherd finds her and adopts her. This young lady ends up having an interesting life of her own with a mythology around it, but we're going to cover that in a completely separate video that I'm going to release later this week. Although my patrons already have access to it, so if you want early access, consider joining the Everwise. $1 a month gets you a vote, $3 gets you early access. Just throwing that out there, there'll be a link in the description. Now, to the east in Babylon, there is the fish god Ornis, also called Adapa or Yuana. Although I should note that according to some of my sources, Adapa was a suffix added to his name meaning the wise. The story, which is set before the Great Flood of Sumerian myth, is that he emerged from the sea to teach mankind how to grow food from seeds, gather fruit, how to write, how to build buildings like temples, and do geometry and math. Basically all the arts of civilization. he and 6 others who would follow him would be seen as the mentors and teachers to all humanity. Now, as a group, they were called the Akalu, and I'll be talking more about this group in a later video. Oarnes himself was worshipped as a god in the 4th century BC, and he was depicted as having the head, arms, and legs of a man, but the body and tail of a fish. In some depictions, he's shown with 2 heads, with the head of a fish behind his human head, like almost like a hood. It's an interesting picture. I should have it posted right now. So, this is a weird setup, and that said, those of you blaming fish for crawling out of the sea and evolving to the point where you have to go to work tomorrow, well, now you know the bastard's name. You're welcome. Let's keep moving east to India, where we're going to talk about the first avatar of Vishnu. So, Vishnu is one of the bigger gods in Hinduism. He's often considered one of the Trimurti with Brahma and Shiva, and my understanding of this is that Brahma is the creator, Shiva is the destroyer, and Vishnu is the preserver. And I will admit, this is an incredible simplification, and I hope that doesn't offend any Hindus or devotees of Vishnu who are listening to this. That said, my understanding is when the universe is in disorder and chaos, Vishnu is supposed to descend into mortal existence in the form of an avatar to help restore harmony to the world. His first avatar is Matsya, sometimes shown as just a large horned fish, and other times as a full-blown merdude. Now, I was able to track down 2 concrete legends about him. The first is that Manu, often a name given to the first man from what I understand, but this Manu was a king before the days of the Great Flood, and caught a fish who begged for his protection. Moved to compassion because, let's be honest, who wants to be eaten, right? I don't want to be eaten. I'm pretty sure most of you don't want that. And if you caught a fish who is like, listen, the sea is scary, help me, I hope you guys would feel some compassion for this poor creature. The king agreed and kept Matsya in a bowl until the fish outgrew it. So he moved him to a bigger container, and he outgrew that. And he moved him to a bigger container until Matsya is so big that the only place he fits is the ocean itself. At which point, this fish, being, well, Vishnu, warns Manu of the flood to come and instructs Manu to build a really large ship, load up his family, food, animals, along with 7 sages, and when the flood comes, he pulls the boat and everyone to safety. The second myth is the one where Matsya tends to be shown as a merman, where the demon Hayagriva steals the Vedas from a sleeping Brahmin who sends Matsya to get them back. He does so by hunting Hayagriva down, finds the demon hiding in a conch shell, and proceeds to, well, kill him and take back the Vedas, restoring order to the universe. While we're talking about avatars, let me talk about a pair of merfolk who show up in a story featuring my favorite avatar, Vishnu, the Ramayama, which is the story of Vishnu's 7th avatar, the Prince Rama, how he and his allies battle the demon king Ravana's fortress to free Rama's kidnapped wife Sita. Now, the story has several versions, and is so popular that it is spread well beyond India. It's popular in Southeast Asia, especially around Thailand, and that's where this story comes from. Now, in this version of the story, Hanuman, a Hindu god who is often depicted as being, if not a monkey man, at least part monkey, is trying to build a bridge to Ravana's fortress that Rama's army can cross to start the siege. Ravana is aware of this and sends his daughter Suvarnamaka, a mermaid princess, to stop him. She does slow him down, but not the way her father likely intended. The story goes like this. Hanuman and his followers, known as the Vanaras, are making the bridge by throwing boulders into the sea. But after a few days, they realize something's going wrong. They're making no progress. Hanuman decides to investigate by jumping into the ocean and telling them, okay, throw the boulders, I'll watch what happens. And this is where he sees an army of mermaids just kind of casually swimming up and going, hey, it's a huge rock, I'm just going to get this out of here. And this prevents the rocks from stacking up into a bridge. He decides to hunt down the commander of the mermaid army, and when he finds her, he attacks. But Suvanamaka is so skilled at evading his attacks that Hanuman finds himself deeply impressed. So impressed that he no longer wants to take her out, he wants to, well, take her out. And Hanuman's game is so good that he is actually able to woo this young lady and convince her to switch sides and help build the bridge. After the bridge is built, they even part ways on friendly terms, which, again, Hanuman, that's a heck of a feat. My hat is off to you, sir. That's not the end of it, though, because after they split up, Suvanamaka finds herself with a little surprise. Hanuman's son, Makhanu, who is depicted as part monkey man, part fish. I also have to note by parentage, he is part merfolk, part demon, part god. This is like the worst RPG character that your little brother made. No offense to Thailand meant by that. It's just, I remember when I thought comic books were the height of weirdness. Look, humanity, no judgment is meant here. I just think it's time to admit we are weird as a species. And we might have some stuff we need to work out. I'm just throwing that out there. Anyways, the war goes on long enough for Makhanu to grow to adulthood. But keep in mind, this is Mythic Days, so that doesn't really mean anything. Anyways, there are two different stories to how he meets his father. The first is he grows up, takes his place in the ranks of Dreadest Grandpapa's army, and swims off to war. He runs into dear old dad, but doesn't recognize him, and they throw down. Now, Makhanu is a chip off the old block and able to stand toe to fin against his dad, who doesn't realize who he is until a passing star yells it out to him. I don't make this stuff up, people. I just tell it to you. At which point, he announces himself to his son, and they decide to hug it out instead of duke it out, which is at least a wholesome ending. In the second version I found, he's raised by his uncle Mayarap, a demon prince who manages to kidnap Rama and his brother. Hanuman comes running to rescue them, but Makhanu is guarding the pond that hides the entrance to the Netherworld Kingdom that the demon prince rules. So Makhanu and Hanuman start fighting, but they fight to a draw. This astonishes Hanuman, who asks, "Who are you, devilishly handsome stranger?" And Makhanu announces himself as the son of Hanuman and Suvanamaka. At which point Hanuman goes, "Wait, son of Hanuman? I'm Hanuman! You're my kid!" Which places Makhanu in a pickle, because he doesn't want to fight his dad or betray the demon who raised him. So he kind of splits the difference by going, "I'm not going to fight you, Dad, but I'm not going to help you. Instead, I'm going to give you a riddle that reveals how to get into the Netherworld, and if you can figure it out, then, you figured it out." Hanuman, of course, pulls it off, and I couldn't find anything else about Makhanu, but I like to think him and Hanuman were able to, build a real relationship after the war, since there's nothing I can find in the stories gainsaying that. And since there's nothing that conflicts with that, I think my take is valid. Now, we keep moving either further east, and we go to Java. Before I get into this, if there are any Indonesians listening, I'm going to just apologize in advance for my pronunciations. I did hunt down a pronunciation guide, but I'm not really confident in that guide, so I'm doing my best. If I really messed it up, just leave me a note below and I'll try to make it good in another video. let me say thank you for your patience. Now, in Java, we have Kanjing Radha Kidul, the spirit queen of the Indian Ocean and the guardian of the cardinal direction of the south. There are 3 other guardians, but they don't matter here. She rules not just nature spirits and the inhabitants of the ocean, but the dead of the sea, and is considered responsible for various mysterious disappearances in and around the ocean. In fact, visitors to the South Java coast to this day are warned not to wear her favorite color, green, because that marks you out as a target. According to the story, her origin was as a mortal princess of a western Javanese kingdom named Ratna Sawida. Her father had remarried, and her stepmother was jealous of her, which is yet another culture I've tripped over with the wicked stepmother trope. I should make a note and cover that topic someday. Wicked stepmothers, I mean. Anyways, wicked stepmom here gets our girl cursed with a hideous skin disease through black magic that leads to our banishment. Our princess heads to the forest to meditate and work her way through this, and in that process she gains supernatural power and insight, which lead to her leaving the forest and casting herself into the sea following some visions and becoming a goddess in the process, so it works out for her. She's often depicted as having the upper body of a beautiful young woman with the lower body of a fish or a snake. She was really important to the Sultanate of Mataram, a state that grew to be the most powerful kingdom on Java until it was conquered by the Dutch in the 1800s. The founder was a man named Sinapati, who came to the coast and prayed so hard that he caused a massive storm. This got her attention. She shows up, makes an alliance where she would provide him with power and arcane knowledge if he took her as his spiritual consort. This relationship continues in the modern-day sultanates of Surakarta and Yogyakarta. Again, apologies for my mispronunciation. I'm pretty sure it's horrid. She is also claimed to be the origin of a sacred dance called the Bedhava Ketawang, where 9 dancers dress in the traditional clothes of Javanese brides and invite her to appear as the 10th dancer. This is done when a new sultan is crowned. Her influence is still strong today, with people claiming to have seen her in the coronation coach for the sultan in 1989. And then there was a hotel fire in 1993 where a fire burned the Grand Bali Beach Hotel in Sonor, Bali. The only room not burnt was room 327, which was always off limits and reserved for the goddess. So the Balinese investigated this and decided that this meant that she was upset with how the room had been maintained, so they renovated and expanded the room, adding room 2401 to give her more space and more luxury. Now, Grand Bali Beach Hotel isn't the only hotel to have a room reserved for her. The Sumatra Hotel also reserves a room for her. You can't stay in this room, but you are allowed to go in there for about an hour to meditate and try to commune with the goddess. In fact, some of my sources claim that every hotel on the islands of Bali and Java do this, but I couldn't find definite proof of that. Okay, this video is growing long, so I'm going to have to split this in half. There are some themes that kept coming up in these stories, and I hope you caught them. Tell me what you thought they were in the comments below, and we'll discuss this further next week. Speaking of next week, next Friday, join me for part 2 of Divine Merfolk. We'll be looking at African, Caribbean examples, and lastly, the Greeks. I hope you found this video informative, or at least entertaining. If so, please leave a like or comment, or consider subscribing. All these help me in my eternal struggle against the dread Lord Algorithm. Terror be on his name. If you'd like a vote on upcoming works, or would just like to support the channel, you can join my Everwise patrons, or even just do a one-time donation at my coffee. Let me just say thank you for watching, and special thanks to Big Steve, my biggest supporter. So join me next week as we dive further into the surprisingly deep and wide waters of Merfolk lore. Until then, please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and of course, keep reading.